Governor Jim Geringer, great servant of our state. Dr. Lori Nichols, the president of the University of Wyoming. With us, Congresswoman Cynthia Lummis, Governor Matt Mead, our First Lady Carol Mead, and our Business Alliance President Bill Schilling. So in Wyoming, I'll say we certainly are blessed with a spirit of American values and honor. As we begin our afternoon program, I ask all of us to pause for a moment in reflection of Veterans Day, which is tomorrow. Veterans Day began as an act of Congress in 1928 as a commemoration to the ending of World War I. Each year at precisely 11 a.m. Eastern Time, on November 11th, the ceremony begins with a wreath being laid on the Tomb of the Unknowns at Arlington National Cemetery. I would like to ask Adjunct General Luke Reiner to say a few words and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Hey, good afternoon. Why don't you have your seats for a sec before we get to the Pledge of Allegiance? Let me just thank the Wyoming Business Alliance and Heritage Foundation for taking the time to recognize the service of so many of us. Before we talk Veterans Day, though, there is something else important we need to recognize today. So the people I would like to stand would be our United States Marines. So if you aren't tracking that, 241 days, today is the Marine Corps happy birthday. So happy birthday, and we thank you for your service. I would ask the veterans in our midst just to stand so we could recognize you. You know, it is good and it is right to pause at this time of year to recognize the service of those among us and those across the nation who have picked up their arms. So for you veterans that are here in this audience, you know, our thanks to you for your service. And what I typically say is this: listen, it doesn't matter how you got into the service. It doesn't matter whether you were drafted or whether you raised your right hand and swore to uphold the oath and uphold the Constitution. Each one of you picked up your rucksack, or you got in your tank, or you got in your aircraft, and you did what this nation asked you to do, and we're all better because of that. So thank you, each one of you, for that service. So let me just one thought here is, you know, the military has been setting conditions for our success for a long time. All started with our colonies in 1636, graduated to, you know, this War of Independence in 1775, and really lots of people kept the globe as we know it through World War I, II, Korea, Vietnam, and you know the rest of the story there. For those of us in uniform today, we stand on the shoulders of all those who have gone before us, and we thank you for setting the conditions for such a fantastic military that we have. It should not be lost on you that we are still a nation of war. And today finds well over 100,000 United States servicemen in about 150 countries around this globe. From Wyoming, from your Wyoming Military Department, today 143 Air Guardsmen and Army Guardsmen serving in places around the globe. And I always think it's good to think about those 143, they're working and they're standing guard so that we can all enjoy doing this today and that we can sleep well tonight. So with that thought, if you would stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd appreciate it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Again, a heartfelt thank you to the General and our service members for your service to our country. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Bill Schilling, again, the President of the Wyoming Business Alliance. Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're doing a little bit of a reverse at lunch today because Governor Geringer might be leaving a bit before the conclusion of Representative Lummis's presentation because he has a 3 o'clock plane to catch, and he's a featured individual at a function tonight in San Francisco. A number of years ago, actually many years ago, we started in our organization an honor called the Heritage Award. And I was with the governor's mother, as he well knows. I get teared up about this. The day before she died, and on her birthday. And immediately thereafter, we decided to change the Heritage Award to the Mary Mead Heritage Award. It's not something we give out every year, but this year we have 2 honorees. Now, these honorees both served on our steering committee together back in the early 1990s. And they were rock stars in the Wyoming State Legislature, and we had them speak at some of our forums and what have you, and I thought, well, I really should have recruited them to get on the steering committee, and they agreed, and they were really just solid leaders in our organization and have been personal friends for me for a long, long time. And so it's my honor to present the Mary Mead Heritage Award to 2 very dear friends of mine and friends of Wyoming. Governor Jim Geringer. And Cynthia Lummis. Governor Geringer said I was a very crafty individual. So with that, it's also my honor to introduce Governor Jim Geringer, who is a personal friend and a friend of so many in Wyoming, and really was, if you think about our first speaker this morning, the governor was really ahead of his time by comparison to other governors, particularly when it came to telecommunications. I'll never forget when we had the folks from Pasadena, and he's talking on the phone by way of satellite from Cheyenne to Casper by way of satellite way back in 1995 or 6 or whenever it was. And so we had a couple of telecommunication conferences. And then, of course, there's the infamous retreat at UCross, where we got the foundation for the Wyoming Business Council, and you were there, Cynthia, and we had a snowstorm as well. So here we are at UCross, and those who remember know where UCross is, we're stranded. Well, we weren't exactly stranded because we had a governor with us, and lo and behold, on that Saturday morning, 2 snowplow trucks appear to escort people who are at this event, there are about 40 of us, to our different destinations. So it was really remarkable. So Governor Geringer is going to introduce Cynthia Lummis. They have been colleagues. They've worked together for many, many years, and so it's our honor to have Governor Geringer introduce Cynthia Lummis.
Well, thank you, Bill. That was quite a conniving Bill invited me to just show up for a few minutes so I could introduce Cynthia. And I was totally oblivious to anything else. You pulled it up. That was masterful. Now, I should know better. Well, Cynthia Lummis. Not Lummis, Lummis. Geringer, not Geringer. Yeah. You know, we have to put up with these things from time to time. I had one individual argue with me that I was mispronouncing my own name. Say, well, yes. I want to talk about Cynthia. If you ever want to know if Cynthia's in the room, just listen. She has one of the most enthusiastic laughs of anyone I've ever met, right? Yeah, you've heard her. Well, but that's the plus. There's just so many pluses. I didn't accumulate a lot of insider stories because I knew it would take too long, but Rob Wallace just reminded me of one, Cynthia, when we were at the new governor's school at Greenbrier in West Virginia. There was a karaoke contest. And it was down to the wire. It was the last two contenders. It was between Wyoming and Massachusetts, between Governor Geringer's team and Bill Weld's team. And we did ZZ Top's Well-Dressed Man. Cynthia was the backup singer. There's a lot of stories like that. Oh, too many stories. Well, let me just get serious now because we have a very serious enterprise to recognize today. I've been fortunate to work with Cynthia, I think, for about 30 years.
It's been a long time now.
When we were in the legislature together. She was on my personal staff. She helped lead my transition team after we were elected into office. She did quite a number of things. She was my general counsel. We didn't know what title to give Cynthia, so he said, well, you're an attorney. Let's make you general counsel. But she'd done so many things in the legislature that paved the way for all types of things in natural resources as well as revenue. Let's see, you chaired the Revenue Committee in the House.
Right.
Yeah. We had, our time in the Wyoming legislature was fun. We sat on the far right of the House chambers. And in fact, we were referred to as the far right. Ron Michael, I was up front. Bob Grant in front of me. Marlene Simons right behind me. When I didn't quite get the message on how to vote, I had a thump on my shoulders and Marlene said, listen to your mother. Cynthia was on back. I can't remember who else was in that row, but when we had a standing division on a vote that was kind of tight, and we knew we had to hold down good values, the far right stood up and was counted. I can tell you that. Cynthia was among them. Well, she comes from good stock. You know that. Doran Lummis family, the family ranch out here in Laramie County. She's no stranger to the open range, public service, dusty rodeo grounds. I don't think she's ever missed a Frontier Days rodeo. The only thing she hasn't done is be a timer down at the bucking chutes.
Good point.
And that has always been her goal. She could not be a timer because she was a woman.
That's true.
Well, we did a lot of things during my time in office to make sure that the women were recognized as leaders, from the Supreme Court on down, and certainly with Cynthia. Well, Cynthia was just going to pursue a rancher's dream, I guess, of running the family ranch. She majored in college in animal science and biology. She knew she couldn't make it right away in agriculture, so how long were you a teacher?
Oh, about 3 months.
She was a teacher for 3 months. She tried it out and said, nah, this isn't for me. Well, let's see. She was the youngest woman ever elected to the Wyoming legislature in 1979. And she's made a mark there ever since. She went back to the University of Wyoming to get her law degree when she knew it wasn't going to pan out in agriculture, but she still maintains her agricultural roots. She got her law degree in 1985. She clerked at the Wyoming Supreme Court. Who did you clerk with?
Justice Urbicite.
Justice Urbicite. Walter.
Yeah.
Walter also was I guess he didn't always stand up on the far right, did he? He was right there in the back, yeah. He was right behind Cynthia. You should have talked to him a little bit more. Well, she did chair my governor-elect transition team. She also spent 2 years as the director of state lands and investment and made a tremendous difference there. Well, she went on to other things. Was elected to as Wyoming State Treasurer in 1998. When she came into office, Wyoming's investments totaled about $3 billion, with a B, $3 billion in permanent funds. The 5 elected officials still today act as the overseers of the administration of those funds, but the treasurer is the one that makes the decisions on what to do, how to do it, and how to increase it. When she left office, that $3 billion had grown to $8.5 billion. So she got tired of that and left in January 2007. She did other things after that. While she was state treasurer, the Frontier Days Committee decided that they ought to invite her to be on their board, and she was the first woman to ever serve on the CFD board. You need to get to them about being a timer at the bucking chute side. Yeah, old age. You're not old yet. I still think of you as that 23-year-old. Well, she had an impact on other things. She spearheaded what we called the Governor's Open Spaces Initiative for Wyoming, and it was quite a package of how to approach balancing the economy, the environment, and energy. And that toolkit became something that was adopted by the Western Governors Association as one of their guide-ons. Same time we were going through the whole in Libra, how to get people to work together. And that understanding of economy, energy development, and environmental management of the West has served her well in her current position in the U.S. House. She was elected to the House in 2008. She followed Barbara Cuban. Now, Barbara and Cynthia and April Brimmer, you should have seen them in the Wyoming Senate. There were 8 women out of 30. Those 8 women had more influence. They referred to themselves as the Pister Sisters. She'll have to explain that one to you. Well, she's been quite a staunch advocate for fiscal responsibility as our representative in the U.S. Congress, the only one, and she swayed a lot of people. She chairs the Congressional Western Caucus. She went toe-to-toe with a number of even the Republican leaders on how we need to keep our promise on how to reduce government and reduce spending and make the regulations work to the taxpayers' favor, not against them. She served as chairman of the Interior Subcommittee of the House Oversight and Government Reform. She held hearings on the waters of the U.S., WOTUS, uranium rules, the electric power grid, and of course, coal and oil and gas leasing. She pushed through the Endangered Species Recovery Transparency Act, which would require that interior agencies track the dollars they spend on ESA, Endangered Species Act litigation, so that it actually went to something worthwhile, not just taking money out of boots on the ground conservation. And in addition to the billions that she managed as a treasurer, she and our congressional delegation worked very hard and were successful at reinstating Wyoming's AML money in the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Act back in December 2015. She knows how to persevere. These are just a few of the things that we can talk about. Bill Schilling already mentioned the genesis of the Wyoming Business Council, the infamous UCross meeting. Boy, that was something else. Was that when the airplane skidded off the runway? Not ours, somebody else's. Maybe that was the one that's supposed to land in Sheridan. I don't remember. She continues to work the Lummis family ranch. You still live the ranch up near Wheatland?
Yep.
Palmer Canyon Road, just next to Ernie Cattell, God rest his soul. Al Wiederspan, who also served with us, Cynthia's husband, God rest his soul, because he was an admirable man, did an awful lot for downtown Cheyenne and for Wyoming. They have one daughter, Annalisa. Where are you? There you are. Well, it's Cynthia's values, her work ethic, her grit, her determination. These are the traits that earn the respect of Wyoming's people because that's what Wyoming's people are about. Charitable, steadfast. She epitomizes Wyoming's tough spirit. And today, this year, as she completes her outstanding service as Wyoming's lone congressional representative, Cynthia personifies the values and loyalty that demonstrate that Wyoming is what America was and what America ought to be. Wrap up the Code of the West with how she regards friends, her faith, her family. You have the best representation of the Wyoming way. Cynthia, you rock. Now, before I turn it over, where is my secret guest? Where is John Barrasso? There he is. John especially came back just to be able to recognize Cynthia, so I want to give John a brief moment at the microphone because they've been a heck of a team back in Washington. John.
Well, thank you very much, Governor. It is great to be here at the Wyoming Business Alliance. Bill, 34 years, always looking forward, always focused on the future. The best speakers you get all year round. Bill Schilling, thank you very much for your ongoing leadership. Thank you. And Jim Geringer, I mean, you talk about a governor who is solid, steady, and successful. That's Jim Geringer. Jim, thank you very much. I wanted to be here just for a moment to talk about my good friend Cynthia Lummis. And the program talks about a lifetime of service. You know, I have such admiration, such appreciation, and such respect for Cynthia, as does everyone here in this room. 8 years she served in the United States Congress, 8 years under a Democrat president. And I will tell you, Mike Enzi and I have had a great partnership with her, and Mike and I are 2 out of 100. Cynthia is 1 out of 435. That is tough duty. And we always had this kind of vision of the stagecoach that said Wyoming on the side, with Mike leading the stagecoach, sitting up there driving it, and me out there riding shotgun, and Cynthia on her own fast horse, way ahead of us with her gun drawn, looking for anybody who's going to get in the way of the state of Wyoming. The governor mentioned the AML money. I mean, you talk about somebody who is a tough and tenacious fighter. It was a lot of money. It was Wyoming's money. Mike Enzi drew up the play. I had the easy part. I was on the conference committee, and I made sure that it was put in the bill that would go to the president, but first it had to go to the House of Representatives. There were 434 other people, Cynthia, who were trying to get the money. And Cynthia fought off each and every one of them to make sure that Wyoming got the money that is our money and that we deserved. Thank you for that incredible job, Cynthia, of making sure Wyoming got the money. So I come here today to tell you, if you're looking for somebody who is going to leave Congress, and if you ask members of Congress, who are you losing? Who is really a mature, experienced, respected voice in the United States House of Representatives, they would all say, Cynthia Lummis. So I'm here with a great sense of friendship and appreciate your leadership and your advocacy, because if you want somebody to stand by you, to fight for you, somebody who is going to be there every day, and you know, I think I kind of branded you as all Wyoming all the time, and you branded the delegation as one for all and all for Wyoming. And that's the way we have done it. So with a great sense of friendship, I appreciate your advocacy, And I will tell you, if Donald Trump wants a Secretary of Interior, you're number one on my list. God bless you. God bless Wyoming. God bless Cynthia Lummis for what work she's done for the people of Wyoming.
Wow. Now, I don't usually get nervous when I speak anymore, but my hands are shaking. This is just unreal. Thank you so much. John, thank you, Senator, for coming all the way from Casper. I know you have to go back there tonight. Thanks for coming down for this. You have no idea how much that means to me. And I was on the phone this morning with Mike Enzi at some length. And that just sort of explains the way our relationship has been. For 8 years, it's been lovely. And I'm more grateful than I can say for that camaraderie, that sharing. It extends to our staffs too. They work together as like one staff. And so we can leverage their talents even beyond what any of us could do ourselves. It has been a godsend to have John Barrasso in the U.S. Senate at a time when healthcare policy has been such a big issue, 20% of the U.S. economy. And he has been a leader both in the United States Senate with regard to policy. He has explained it to the American people. We all know him as Wyoming's doctor. America knows him as America's doctor, because when he gets on television and explains healthcare policy from his perspective as a physician, when he works with his fellow physicians in the United States Congress, he is the lead voice, which is why he is a member of the U.S. Senate's leadership team. John, we are grateful to you. We are proud of you. Thank you so very much. And as I was thinking about what to talk about today, I'd gone through all these issue papers and thought about giving us kind of a synopsis of our work in Congress. And then I thought, really, if you're looking at a career in public service in Wyoming, it's not about that. It's about the people that I have worked with along the way, who have guided me and counseled me, helped me, encouraged me, worked with me, and that we have all done it because we love this state so much. And there's a bunch of them here at this head table, and this whole room is full of those people. So it's humbling for me to speak to you, because you're the people who shaped my love for this state, shaped my views as I have legislated or been state treasurer and worked on behalf of Wyoming. And I'm unusually nervous and very touched by this entire hour here that we're spending together. But it really is the people that have made it so special. And I'm going to start with Jim Geringer. He's gone, isn't he? Well, some of his old staffers are in this room, you know, the people that I worked with in the governor's office. I see Jimmy Orr and Mary Kay Hill and Matt Jones and I continue to work together in our congressional office, but Matt and I also work together in Governor Geringer's office. I understand that Rob Wallace is in town. Oh, he's in the room. Hey, Rob. Rob was our chief of staff in the governor's office. The night that Jim Geringer it was January 1st, and Jim Geringer had just been elected. And it was a freezing cold night, just bitter cold. And Rob Wallace had rented the Cheyenne trolley so we could all celebrate the election of our friend Jim Geringer as governor. And we went about town and pulled up in front of the state capitol building. And one of the more exuberant staffers on his campaign was with us. And he promptly, now close your ears, Governor, he promptly climbed the statue of Esther Hobart Morris and laid a big smacking kiss on her lips. And it was so cold that his lips stuck to her lips, and they were locked in a very painful embrace for quite some time. And like so many people eventually have to do, he just ripped the Band-Aid off. It was quite an ugly moment, but very memorable. You know, I wrote some testimony for Jim Geringer when he was governor on soda ash on Trona, and sent him back to Washington with it. I worked so hard on it. You know, Mary Cahill could just think of things and sort of muse on things and bat them around in her head. She'd go in her office, close her door, and start writing, and boom, it was on paper. For me, it was like giving birth to a porcupine, you know, to write. And I worked so hard on this testimony. Well, he came back, said it went great. They sent the testimony to me because they want you to proof it after it's been delivered. So I sat down with it in my office, and I read, "I am Jim Geringer, Governor of Wyoming." Okay, that's what I wrote. Not one other word that I wrote was the same. He had rewritten the entire testimony. And that's what it was like working for Jim Geringer. He was a stickler for detail, and a great boss, a wonderful, wonderful chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. When I was in the Senate, I was on his committee, and it was 3 men and 2 women. It was 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And sometimes we wrote major legislation. And that was back when the legislators wrote legislation. They didn't just get legislation that was written by someone else. And we worked for 8 solid hours in session on a concealed carried weapons bill. And it was a fine work product. And you had sometimes votes were the boys against the girls, the Democrats or Republicans, the ranchers against the urban people. I mean, there was all kinds of mixtures, but it was never always along party lines. It was a fabulous committee. One of those committee members now is my dear friend Greg Phillips, who serves on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. And when he was appointed to serve on that 10th Circuit, I knew that you had picked the right guy was serving, and he was your old law partner. What a great lawyer, what a great friend, a Democrat from Evanston, just a lovely man. In my law school class, there was a guy who graduated #1 in our class, and like #1 up here. And then there was #2, #3, #4, #5. And the guy who graduated #1 in our class, who was just, you know, so far ahead of the rest of it, it was unbelievable, is currently the Attorney General of the state of Wyoming. Pete, one of the things I got to do when I was in Congress was attend a Supreme Court argument that was presented by Pete. And so I got to go over, and then we all walked over with some of his old friends that were in Washington at the time, and had a nice dessert and coffee in the dining room of the U.S. House of Representatives, and that was very memorable. Pete, you're doing such good work for Wyoming. Thank you so much for your service. And Governor, I've got to say you've got great taste in law partners and attorneys general. Super talent, super talent. You know, I was a freshman member of the House with Charlie Scott, and to think of the fact that he's still there legislating on behalf of Wyoming is just remarkable. I served, as the governor said, with Barbara Cuban and with April Bremer Kuhn. She eventually became the first woman president of the Wyoming Senate, and of course Barbara Cuban, our first woman congressman, and it was such an honor to follow her in the United States Congress. I also served in the legislature with a guy named Al Wiederspan, who I met, a Democrat from here in Laramie County. And we were on the House Judiciary Committee together. And we ended up being married for 31 really wonderful years. And Annalise is our only child, and she is here today. Annalise Wiederspan, who works here in Cheyenne, because when Al died, she inherited all his businesses and all the work associated with his businesses. And so she is a busy person. And your father, Annalise, would be so proud of you, because you have taken his businesses that were in various stages of their completion. And you have stepped up to the plate, my dear girl. And I'm so proud of you, and your father would be as well. Mike Kenzie and John Barrasso, I want to say again, have been such great colleagues. That's been maybe the greatest blessing of my term, my time in Congress, is serving with Mike Kenzie and John Barrasso. They serve Wyoming so well. Our team is so close. We are glued together, regardless of whether we see each other once a week, 3 times a week, or only back here when we're traveling around Wyoming. There is a respect, a love, a working relationship that I value and prize more than I can say. As I said, I was on the phone with Mike Kenzie this morning. John was here today. I mean, it's been that way for 8 years. It's just been lovely. And it has allowed us to leverage the talents of our staffs and of each other in a way that I know will continue when Wyoming's new congressman takes office in January, Liz Cheney. It is a high standard that we have set, I think, for camaraderie. You have Mike Kenzie, who is an absolute workhorse, the most influential member of the U.S. Senate you've never heard of, is what we like to say about Mike Kenzie. John Barrasso, who is the more high-profile member, who articulates, who is on the news. You know, I used to fly Frontier Airlines back when they gave you more than 6 inches of leg room. And they had these television screens embedded in the back of the seats. You could watch TV as you were flying, and invariably I would fly back on Monday. The senators would fly back on Sunday. And John Barrasso would come on, and I'd be sitting there, and I would say to the person sitting next to me, "That's my United States Senator." Because he was saying what we care about, what we think, and has done a marvelous job. As you know, Mike Kenzie defeated John Barrasso to become a member of the United States Senate, and John Barrasso was selected when I was not, to be a member of the United States Senate. And you know what? I couldn't be more proud to serve with 2 people in the Congress of the United States on behalf of Wyoming than anyone I can think of. So thank you for that honor and privilege as well. I decided I wanted to answer a question, pose a question and answer it. Who will I miss the most in Washington? Who will I miss the most? And this was so easy to answer. I have a tremendous crush on a man with whom I serve. This crush was well known to my husband. He and I have dinner together 4 or 5 times a year. He is one of the greatest living Americans. And the fact that I serve with him in Congress still just astounds me. His name is Sam Johnson. Sam Johnson is from Plano, Texas. Sam Johnson is 84-ish, maybe 85. Sam Johnson was shot down as an Air Force pilot over North Vietnam in 1966. Sam Johnson served 7 years as a prisoner of war in the Hanoi Hilton. He served 2 of those years with 10 other highly dangerous, in the view of the North Vietnamese, highly dangerous prisoners of war. They were in leg chains for 2 years. They were in solitary confinement for 2 years. He had a broken arm that never healed. He had to have tendons restrung after he got back home. He still walks with a limp. His one arm hangs from his side. There is not a bitter bone in that man's body. He is an amazing patriot. And when we go out to dinner, I just say, Sam, tell me stories. And the stories he tells are so fascinating you can hardly believe they really happened. He fought MiGs, hand-to-hand air combat, over Korea. He was the lead Thunderbird for the Air Force Thunderbirds before he flew in Vietnam. He was on the ground in Korea, living in Quonset huts. And the Air Force guys were in a Quonset hut next to the Navy guys. And there was a constant rivalry between the 2 of their Quonset huts. And a gentleman named John Glenn and Sam Johnson had this ongoing rivalry between those 2 Quonset huts that continued throughout their lives. Good-natured fun. One of them would go put a blanket over their wooden stove pipe and fill up their Quonset hut with smoke. Sam told me that the Koreans were so primitive that they had 2-seater airplanes with the pilot in one seat and a guy sitting with a bomb in the other open seat. And they would fly over their target, and one guy would take the bomb out of his lap and heave it over the side of the plane to do their bombing missions in Korea. When Sam Johnson came back from being a prisoner of war, he went back to work as a wing commander at Homestead Air Force Base. That's when, there was a time when, of course, we were testing nuclear weapons, and they wanted an Air Force pilot to fly through the mushroom cloud that they were testing just to see what it would do. And Sam said, I'll do it, and he did. There was a time when they had a nuclear bomb in the belly of an airplane. And the guy who was on the tarmac, the guy who's at the controls hits the wrong lever, boom. Nuclear bomb drops onto the tarmac. And they all are looking at each other, thinking it's the end of their lives and the end of life as everyone knows it at Homestead Air Force Base. And they all look at it, and Sam just finally goes, well, I think we better just go put it back where we found it. So they walk back out on the runway, hoist this nuclear bomb back into the bomber, put the gear back in place, and never talked about it again. Until today. I hope there's a statute of limitations on that one. He is a dearly beloved American. Like no one I've ever met, and that is who I will miss the most. I also served, as did Betsy Markey, who is here today, a former congressional colleague who's here. Betsy, thank you. She's now with the Small Business Administration. She'll be on your program this afternoon. We served with John Lewis in the U.S. Congress. John Lewis, the great civil rights hero. And when you think about the fact that we served with John Lewis and Sam Johnson, it's just the thread of America that these kinds of people are people you know and love and got to know, and their roles in this country will never be forgotten. Who have been the most interesting people I've met? Well, there are several there too. I got to go to India, and I met this governor of Gujarat province, which is where Gandhi was from. very progressive in terms of business creation. This organization would be so proud to see what he had done over there. There's tremendous economic growth for his province of India. Narendra Modi, that governor who we spent many hours with. I had dinner with him at this beautiful ceremony that he had when he hosted our delegation. He is now, of course, the head of government in India. So we had become such friends, and he was so fond of Al. We had gone with a congressional delegation and then stayed on our own dime for another few days in India. You guys got to go to India, didn't you? It's such an exotic place. And Al and I got to ride elephants playing polo. And Al was wearing his cowboy hat at the time. And I was telling the Wyoming Leads group, the ag leadership group, about that. And then they went and signed up for riding elephants playing polo. It was a remarkable experience in Jaipur, India. But Al and now Prime Minister Modi had become friends. It's because of Al's cowboy hat. He just viewed him as a very unique individual. And Al really stood out in India in his cowboy hat. Well, I was invited to Narendra Modi's first visit to the United States because he had been banned from coming here. Because when he was governor of Gujarat, there had been an uprising of very serious riots between Hindus and Muslims. And it was alleged that he did not put down the riots quickly enough, and the United States would not give him a visa to come into this country. And I and several of the other members of Congress who were on that trip were working hard to try to get him a visa to visit, which of course he finally got when he became the head of the country. So he invited me to come to Madison Square Garden, where he was speaking for the first time in the United States. And so here I am. It was so bizarre. Here I am on the stage in the middle of Madison Square Garden, looking at this massive crowd of Indian Americans who were there to see Modi in a world televised speech. And I'm standing on the stage with the Prime Minister of India going, how did a little sheep showman 4-H girl from Wyoming get on this stage? So bizarre. Now, Lori Nichols, we're so proud to have you here. I want to tell you, my chief of staff, Tucker Fagan, has gotten so many fabulous interns for our offices from the University of Wyoming. And I had a UW intern with me who was from Nepal and who also spoke a little Tibetan. And I took him with me to meet the Dalai Lama. And there were a number of members of Congress there and their interns. And he was lovely. He came up and visited with the interns, but briefly. But as he turned to leave, my intern from the University of Wyoming started speaking to him in his native language, and he whipped around. And those two had a lovely conversation. I have no idea what they spoke about, and nobody else in the room did but them. But it was amazing and fabulous, and that's what Wyoming can do for people. I mean, it was just staggering. Benjamin Netanyahu is another of the most interesting people I've met. Now, the last time I was in his office, and I've been in his office several times, he is very gracious about visiting American members of Congress. I had the opportunity, I was with 11 other members of Congress this time, big delegation. And he was talking about how grateful they are for the support they get from Americans, just in terms of policy support, because they're so alone, so isolated there in the Middle East. And I said to him, Yes, my dad, and this is the truth, my dad asked me to tell you that there is a Christian cowboy from Wyoming who supports you and supports Israel. And Benjamin Netanyahu gets a picture of himself. He slides a piece of paper over to me and said, "What is your father's name?" I wrote it down, slid it back to him. He signed a picture of himself to Doran Lummis, in friendship and affection, Benjamin Netanyahu. And you know, my dad thinks that I never tell people what he tells me to tell them. Well, this time I had absolute proof. So I returned from this trip and I gave my dad that picture, and he has it hung just above his chair where he sits in his house at 89 years old. Can't see very well anymore, but he knows that picture's there. And of course, it's a conversation piece, because what is a Christian cowboy from Wyoming doing with a picture, a signed picture from Benjamin Netanyahu over his chair? And you know what? You know why he did that? When he gave me that picture after our meeting, he said to me, "Are there really still cowboys in Wyoming?" And I said, "Yes, there are, and my dad is one of them." So yet another example of how this place opens doors. I went to Egypt several times and have become very fond of Egypt and the Egyptian people. We met with El-Sisi in his office the day after they amended their constitution, which pretty much ushered out the Brotherhood, and brought back a more secular government. You know, Egypt is the cultural leader of the Arab world. Music, clothing, business. So having someone who has a more even view is so important to us. I was in Sisi's office with Linda Sanchez, who was just defeated, unfortunately, for the California U.S. Senate seat being vacated by Barbara Boxer. Linda Sanchez is on the Armed Services Committee. She is a Democrat. She is kind of a conservative Democrat, a blue dog, as we call them. And I watched on that trip 2 Egyptian men propose to her. She has this appeal. It is one of those strong, I know what I'm talking about type of military presence, but a way to do it that is just so apparently alluring that I witnessed her being proposed to twice. Very interesting trip. Sisi is our friend. We should reach out to him more. Other most interesting things. I served in Congress with a guy named Jeff Landry from Louisiana. He was defeated in a re-elect, and then ran for Attorney General in Louisiana, and is currently serving as Louisiana Attorney General. He is a Cajun. He was very difficult to understand, smart lawyer, smart. But he would say things that I thought, I think he's right, but I just wasn't sure I understood him, so I'd have to go to his office and get debriefed in English. Well, he invited me down to his alligator hunting camp, and I went. I shot my first alligator. I ate boudin balls, and I ate shrimp etouffee, and listened to Cajun music, and I have an alligator purse and an alligator belt to speak for. He was so excited. Last summer, he came up to Cheyenne Frontier Days with their friends. I just gave him the key to my house and moved in with my scheduler, and my house is a block and a half from Frontier Park. And they just went up and had a ball. In fact, Governor, you met their son, because I brought him out to your house for one of the events at Cheyenne Frontier Days. And the governor and Carol, the party was going on by the time they get back to their house. Not very that was kind of rude of us, but I mean, it was nice of you to just let us carry on, you know, kind of the old gypsies in the palace thing. And the son of the Attorney General of Louisiana is at the governor's residence serving the guests. He's going around serving everyone hors d'oeuvres and then later dessert and then picking up their garbage. I mean, this is a hilarious family. They loved it. They will be back. Thank you for accommodating them and us. Last July 4th, I had a bill on the floor of the House on July 5th. So I couldn't be in Wyoming on July 4th. I had to fly, 5th, I had to fly out on the 4th in order to present my bill on the floor of the House on July 5th. So I was on the U.S. Capitol porch, the speaker's balcony, watching the fireworks. And they appear behind the Washington Monument, and tremendous performances by the Marine Band, and it was so remarkable. And just standing there looking out on the mall and looking at the Washington Monument, I thought to myself, what an honor to serve Wyoming in Congress. What a special place this is. There's no place like this. You know, we had a travel commission motto, like no place on earth. This is like no place on earth. This is a uniquely special place that we've been entrusted with, that we are stewards of. And I am grateful to be a part of it. I want to acknowledge my wonderful Wyoming-based staff, who is also grateful to be part of it, and ask them to stand. Jackie King, Christy Clark, Carmen Rossi, Shirlene Kaiser, Matt Jones, Pat Ullman, and one of our former colleagues, Ryan McConaughey, who Dr. McGinley from Casper wisely stole from us. Our chief of staff, Tucker Fagan, who so many of you know, was the wing commander. Years in the Air Force, wing commander at F.E. Warren Air Force Base, 7 years as director of the Wyoming Business Council, kept trying to retire, kept failing at retiring, much to my good blessing. Tucker and all of you with the Wyoming congressional staff, thank you for your service to our state. It has been extraordinary. And to you all, the leaders of our state, thank you for the great honor and privilege of serving you in the United States Congress. There is no higher honor. God bless you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Representative Lummis. I think we, both in this room and across Wyoming, will remember your service to the state for many, many years. We'd also like to thank your staff that's with us today for their dedicated service to the state. So again, thank you. Appreciate it. Well, education, as I've mentioned before, is one of the core mission elements for the Wyoming Business Alliance. Today, we're honored to have our First Lady, Carol Mead, with us for the inaugural First Lady's Literacy Award. Education begins with each and every one of us, and you've become a tireless leader and advocate, writing a wonderful book, involvement in the education initiative at the College of Education, and champion of literacy. Carol?
Thank you, Chairman. Very kind. And hello, Wyoming business leaders. I feel really privileged and honored to be in a room with Wyoming's best and brightest. Thanks for letting me in the door. Anyway, this is a wonderful conference that you have going, and how fortunate we are to have so many people to come and share in this. I've been generously given a few minutes to present, and I'm glad you had a little trouble with that too. It's kind of alliteration, this First Lady's Leaders in Literacy Award, and I keep stumbling on it. But anyway, it's an inaugural award that we came up with, and want to really recognize great leaders across the state who have done wonderful things. Before I get started, though, I just want to especially thank Bill Schilling. Thank you for allowing this time very much, and also to the Heritage Foundation and the Business Alliance. To be able to present this award in front of business and civic leaders and our citizens of the state is a wonderful opportunity, and I appreciate it. Thank you. So why a literacy award at the Business Forum? Well, let me just start by saying that I hope that the children of today will be our leaders of tomorrow, and that they will be the participants down the road in a forum just like this. And so the governor, Maddie, don't worry, I won't break into a ZZ Top rendition of Well-Dressed Man. But Matt and I believe that children are Wyoming's greatest asset. And to the extent that we can foster for them healthy, happy, and successful upbringings, to some extent we secure the future of Wyoming, and certainly the future of those children. So in addition to promoting the arts and health among children, I've spent the balance of my time working to promote early childhood literacy. And I've read to children all over the state in daycares and preschools and libraries, given away hundreds of copies of my book to first graders at the end of their first grade year when they learn to read. It's a very exciting time to celebrate that with them. And with a coalition of volunteers, we began Eat, Read, Grow. Many of you in this group were part of that coalition in various ways. This is a program that encourages financially disadvantaged families to share books and reading and the love of reading over a hot meal, and each family receives a grocery bag of food at the evening of the event. And it was a great success here in Cheyenne, and so we traveled the state to different communities and worked to give them a skeleton or a toolkit of how to begin that program in their communities. And I'm really pleased to say it's now in 10 communities across the state. So wonderful work with a lot of different partners. But probably the work I'm really the most pleased about is to be able to work with the University of Wyoming to establish the Literacy Research Center and Clinic. The LRCC promotes across the ages and disciplines, financial as well as every discipline of literacy really, but with distance technology, they are able to digitally capture tutoring sessions and various events that go on there and broadcast them across the state so they can be played again and again. They are making a tangible difference for kids in this state. We all know that reading is important in all stages of life. It strengthens the bond between a parent and a child when a young child is read to. It improves their intellectual curiosity, and maybe most importantly, it fortifies their ability to educate themselves for a lifetime. And learning to read at grade level is absolutely critical to a child's success in school and beyond. Studies point to the fact that children who do not read at grade level by third grade go on to struggle to learn year after year and set themselves up on a trajectory toward becoming a high school dropout. Well, we can do better. And that data is actually so strong that in 2 states in the nation now, California and Indiana, they actually can predict their future prison needs based off third grade reading scores. Because children who are unable to read at grade level and go on to struggle throughout school are much more likely to be convicted of a felony down the road. So despite good teachers and supportive parents, I know there are people all over the state, children and adults, that struggle to learn to read. And the LRCC is making a very tangible difference in the lives of these children. Additionally, we believe the LRCC will raise the national profile of the University of Wyoming. It will become a premier literacy center and research hub, well known across the state and through the nation. In short, Wyoming as a whole stands to benefit from its success. Well, I have the great pleasure of co-chairing the LRCC Outreach Advisory Board with my good friend Judy Catchpole. Come on up here, and let me also introduce our Executive Director at the Literacy Research Center, Dr. Dana Robertson. Invite them to come on up. Our board, which is comprised of leaders in education and business from around Wyoming, created the First Lady's Leaders in Literacy Award last spring as a way to acknowledge and encourage individuals and organizations that are working in innovative ways to advance literacy in Wyoming. We had over a dozen nominees representing 9 communities. All of them put their heart and soul into helping children and families learn to read and love to read. This year's recipients stood out among the other nominees for the scope of their work and their measurable outcomes. Not only does this organization work with children, but it works with adults through a variety of methods. Way up in Teton County, this organization enlists a group of specialists and volunteers to help implement its family literacy enrichment and tutoring programs, free of charge, thereby connecting people from throughout the community. They integrate STEM and the arts, also known as STEAM, and experiential and problem-based learning. The staff and volunteers are working toward 100% literacy in the community. Last year, they served 691 students, and by the end of the academic year, 79% of the school-aged kids who had received 20 or more hours of education were reading at grade level. Well, I would like to show just a 2 to 3 minute video to introduce the Teton Literacy Center, which is this year's awardee. Let's roll the video if we could. Thank you.
Reading is important. Like if you want to be a teacher or a doctor or a sciencer, you have to read books.
The Teton Literacy Center is helping me read a lot.
Now I can read harder books.
Some of my favorite things about books is that they can be so many varieties. Historical fiction, historical nonfiction.
My favorite book are actually who was books. Like who was Abraham Lincoln, who was Neil Armstrong. I love reading.
Teton Literacy Center is a family literacy center that offers out-of-school time program for children preschool through high school and their families. All of our programs are free. We have 3 overarching programs. We have the Family Literacy Program, which works with our Literacy Lab preschool program and also our adult program.
Perfect. Yep.
Then we have our enrichment program, which is our after-school and summer programs.
Yep, you just need to add an extra line of code.
And then our tutoring program is our largest program, and it's our longest program that we've had.
Clown.
Good job. Nice work.
And that is for students who need intervention support. So they are coming to us reading behind grade level.
Want to go back to that one, or you want to start with one of these today?
Carter would pick up a book, and we'd end up trying to work through the book, sounding things out, and it would 9 out of 10 times just end up being in tears. And I didn't know how to help him, because how do you help your child when they're just crying and they won't even try? He's had different tutors every year, a lot of them just very fantastic people who give their own time. They're not being paid, they're just here helping my child out.
Crunch.
See that word you didn't get before, and you got it perfect this time.
We understand that not all students learn the same way, and at Teton Literacy we can provide other avenues of teaching and other strategies that might work for that student, and that we're able to work with them individually. And that's a luxury that we have out of school that they don't have during the school day.
Okay, well, if I could invite then Laura West-Saltow, who is the director of the Teton Literacy Center, to come on up. And let's say a big congratulations to this year's winner of the First Lady's Leaders in Literacy Award, which will carry a stipend of $4,000 for the Teton Literacy Center and a plaque recognizing their amazing work. Thank you. And I'll let our other co-chair, Judy Catchpole, say a few words.
First of all, I hope you all go home and think about how important children learning to read, how important that is. I've been a kindergarten teacher. My daughter's been a kindergarten teacher. And we talk often about when you have a child come to your kindergarten room who's never held a book in their hands. And then you think of how your children came to kindergarten. You had been reading to them, and how we have to catch that child up by third grade. It's a very difficult, often not successful task. So go home and ask someone in your community, what are we doing to get children started reading? We would be negligent if we didn't want to thank Tyler Spear, who is working with the foundation program. He's been such a great support to us. And once we were just started, we have been blessed in Wyoming to have Dean Ray Reitzel become the College of Education new dean. I have a contract and work in 15 states. When I was in one state, we were talking about the College of Education and how the state superintendent, that I had to work with one university, and how many she had, 47 College of Educations to work with. And I said, well, we have a brand new dean. And she said, who's that? Because she had been the dean of a small College of Education college. And she said, who is that? And I said, Dean Ray Reitzel. She said, no, I don't believe it. Wyoming got Ray Reitzel to be the dean of your College of Education. He's sought after by everyone in this nation. We have the best of the best in the College of Education today. So supportive of the Literacy Center that Carol and I have had the privilege to get to work with.
Well, what a great honor for a great program, and congratulations to this year's winners. Thank you, Carol, for doing that with us today. We're now going to take kind of a quick stretch break. We'll be back at 2 o'clock. And please take a minute, if you haven't, to visit the vendor booths today. And when we come back, Fred Von Ahrens, our vice chair, will take over moderator duties. So see you at 2 o'clock.